the wonder of the universe does not go away because when you understand the science of it. If anything, it's more so. Again, going back to Carl Sagan, he made a statement that Tyson has said it, many people said it, how we're made out of the same thing stars are made of. We're made out of star stuff. This is wild. Well, yeah, I think that's amazing too. Our understanding of the elements, the same elements that are in stars are in I think that's amazing. But immediately, of course, as a believer, I think of my creator. Hi there, welcome to the Catholic Skeptic. That title obviously may be one of the reasons some of you might be watching this. It's sort of an odd statement. If you clicked on this by accident and you heard me say Catholic Skeptic, I'm sure there's kind of a sorry what reaction. What does that mean? Some of you would be saying the Catholic what? Others of you might be saying the what kind of skeptic? And that's understandable because generally the word skeptic is not paired with Catholic or Christian or believer, or for that matter, if it was the Jewish skeptic, the Muslim skeptic, the Hindu skeptic, because skeptics by and large have a monopoly on, or I should say atheists and agnostics have a monopoly on the word skeptic. It's been for time immemorial, going back, way back. I mean, if you went back a couple hundred years, maybe deists might call themselves skeptics, but for the most part, for at least the last 150 years, skeptics are usually identified as atheists and agnostics. And yet I believe I am a skeptic, and I also happen to be a Catholic. That's a strange combination, I understand that. But let's understand this. Skeptics generally take on certain views based on what they consider to be skepticism. All right, and the isms always have certain doctrines or dogmas connected with them. All right, but I'm really into words. I love words. I've always had a real fascination with words. I can remember even as a little kid, my parents would take me to my uncle's house and aunt and uncle's house in Delaware, and my uncle was very big on books. There were books all over the place, and I'd read as a little kid and just read books. Probably some of them weren't even appropriate for my age, but I'd really get into them. And one of the things that he had was this huge, big-ass dictionary that would sit in the middle of the room, or near the fireplace next to a Scrabble game, because he was really into playing Scrabble. And that's how they fact-checked their words, with this giant, thick dictionary. And I kind of love those things. And of course, that was the pre-internet days. Now, of course, now if you want to look up a word, you can just pop out your phone and do it. But I got fascinated with those, and so in garage sales and things, whenever I'd find those dictionaries, I'd buy them, and I own a few. And one of the dictionaries I have is the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language. And the first definition for skeptic, when you look it up in that particular dictionary, reads like this: one who instinctively or habitually doubts, questions, or disagrees with assertions or generally accepted conclusions. Now that fits my personality. That fits my makeup, the way I think. I generally do doubt, question, and sometimes disagree with many assertions and generally accepted conclusions. I don't automatically accept things. I investigate things. I look into things. I examine things. That's why I consider myself a skeptic. All right, that's my understanding. Now, let me be clear. You can read into that from the other extreme. Understand, I'm not a wild-eyed conspiracist who sees everything in strange ways. But I don't automatically accept what the media says, what you hear commonly accepted. I look into things. To call myself a Catholic, to call myself a Christian, to call myself a believer, understand that I didn't come to that just because I might have been raised with certain teachings or things like that. I came to that through reading, through research, through study, for my own seeking. I don't accept anything at face value or commonplace, and that's why I consider myself a skeptic. All right. But skepticism, as understood as an ism, always tends to imply agnostics and atheists. Why is that? Well, because there's a certain emphasis in skepticism on empiricism, empirical evidence. And there's kind of a mindset, and frankly, I call it a dogma, all right? A dogmatic view that the only thing we can know for certain is what we can empirically prove, what evidences exist. If the evidence exists according to our senses, how we look at things, how we can, if we can't see, hear, taste, or touch it, or have an instrument that can measure it in a sensory manner, then there's a tendency not to acknowledge that as something we can know. All right, I heard a line in a movie once where someone said, if I can't if it can't be quantified, then it doesn't exist, as their belief system. I said, well, let's face it, there are tons of things that we can't quantify, we can't measure in any manner that we believe in, including any atheists and agnostics who might be watching this right now. There are all kinds of things we believe. You believe in freedom, you believe in equality, you believe in social justice, you believe in things. Many people take on positions like this very passionately and have no belief in God or spiritual things. But what are those things from a empiricist point of view? You cannot, what does justice smell like? What does what does equality feel like or taste like? You can't pick it up on your senses. It's not a sensory thing. It's not something you can determine in the material sense of the word. But I doubt, no matter what you believe scientifically, that you really believe that your beliefs, your values, the things you hold dear, are nothing more than the firing off of neurotransmitters in the brain, that they're nothing more than chemical reactions. Your love for your children, my love for my children, is that just it's just an instinct of the species? Do you look at your children, for example, and think, well, these are simply the biological offspring of my being with certain genetic factors inside of them, that they're nothing more than the random byproduct of time and chance acting on matter in a blind mechanical process over millions of years, and that they have no value other than they come into existence, exist for a while, hopefully have some nice time, and then disappear out of existence? I doubt it. I think you think more of that for your children. I think I do too. So really, when you look at some of these perspectives, you understand that it's not as simple as that. Be skeptical, examine things, look at things, question things. But there is more rational thinking involved in believing in God than you may think. I believe in God. I believe in the Christian understanding of God. I believe in the Catholic creeds, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian Creed, the Apostles' Creed. Thinkers like C.S. Lewis and Dorothy Sayers would affirm the same thing. Dorothy Sayers wrote a book called The Creed or Chaos. Went into great detail about that. And neither of them were per se Catholics, but that was their understanding. And they believed they had rational positions, to be reasonable, to engage in rational thinking, speculation, intuitive insight, the multiplicity of testimony of other people. All these things are evidence as much as is physical empirical evidence. So skepticism does not by itself have to be something that is just putting you in simply a mindset. And one of the ways that I came to these conclusions is by simply taking skeptical thinking and applying it to skepticism. See, skeptics will apply skeptical thinking to religion, to philosophy, to assertions about things like the supernatural all the time, but very often they don't apply it to skepticism itself. On what empirical basis do we know that we have to have empirical evidence? Who sets that standard? All right. In a court of law, you don't have to have empirical evidence to convict somebody. There's a variety of evidence, witnesses, testimonies, DNA, all kinds of different things that are involved in evidence to prove someone. If a jury, let's say, is going to put someone on trial and they're going to either acquit them or convict them based on not having a reasonable doubt as to their guilt or innocence, they don't have to have beyond a shadow of a doubt understanding. There are truths we can understand and things that conclusions we can come to, because there are a lot of things that indicate those things are true. And there are things about us as human beings, as a human species, things that are innately a part of our lives, the mysterious, the spiritual, the numinous, the things that are part of our lives, intuitions, instincts, all kinds of things that don't have a foundation really in biology. Even they're just something about, when someone knows a loved one is going through something, they have a feeling something's wrong with someone they love, and they call them, they find out that it's true. These kind of things happen to people all the time. Insights, awarenesses, all kinds of things. And there's always a tendency to always want to spiritualize even the scientific. The late Carl Sagan, of course, did a series back in 1980 on PBS called Cosmos. Neil deGrasse Tyson did a reboot of it a few years ago as well. Both of them are very excellent. But it's interesting, if you watch the original Carl Sagan one, there's music, and it opens with him standing on a beach and a shore, and he talks about the shore of the cosmic ocean and uses it as a metaphor, of course. And then his opening line, Carl Sagan's opening line in Cosmos, he says, "The cosmos, all that is, or was, or ever will be." And you almost want to say amen at the end of that. It sounds spiritual, it sounds religious, it sounds mystical. And it also sounds, if I can be bold, dogmatic. How do we know the cosmos is all there is? How do we know that's the only thing that is? Just what we can, we can perceive, physically. How do we know that there's nothing beyond that? You can infer from that statement that that's part of the foundation of saying it that way. All that is or was or ever will be. Only what we can see. Aristotle, for example. Aristotle, I believe, is the one, and you can fact check me in the comments if I'm wrong, who coined the term atom, talking about the smallest thing that everything's made of are atoms. Well, Aristotle had no concept then of what we know about atoms today. We know that an atom has a nucleus that has protons, neutrons, and electrons rotating around it, that matter itself is made of energy. And yet we know the reality of all the scientific evidence for this, including the horrific evidence of what happened in World War II in 1945 when atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Massive destructive force when the unleashing of the splitting of the power of the atom. Horrible things that took place. We know the reality of this, but none of this was perceived by the senses of anybody in Aristotle's time or for centuries even after that. No one understood some of these things. Within matter itself, there's so many things we know. Today, there are those in the scientific community who propose multiverse theory. Now, multiverse theory was big in the comic books. When I was a kid growing up, it was big in science fiction, parallel universes, things like that. That's considered a legitimate thing to theorize about and to explore. There's not a shred, as far as I know, of any empirical evidence for it, per se, but there are various reasons why it's being proposed. So why is it outlandish to think there might be a heaven? That there might be spiritual things, that God might indeed exist? I don't think that it's that great a leap to do that. The idea that, well, in scientific terms, we know so much about science today, and people will say things like that, well, how can you believe in God? Listen, science, to really understand it, of course, it comes from the Greek word, which means knowledge, but science and the scientific method, Descartes, Francis Bacon, the experimentation, getting evidence, science is awesome. I love science. Science is phenomenal. But understand this, science is about mechanics. Science is about how things happen. Even when scientists talk about things like the late Stephen Hawking would talk about the unified field theory, the theory of everything, what it would be like to have a scientific theory, to explain everything. We could know why these happen. He really wasn't addressing why. He was addressing how. Science deals with how things happen. If you ask a biologist, how did life begin on Earth? How did life develop on Earth? He could talk to you for hours about evolution and all aspects of that. But if you ask him, why is there life? Why? Well, we don't know. We don't why. Why is there something and nothing? Why is there life? There are things that science can't explain. And it's almost like they put a ceiling over that knowledge saying, you can't understand this. It's not knowable, so we won't believe we can know it because we can't know it by the method of science. For example, take the words atheist and agnostic. When people identify themselves as agnostic, sometimes they think it's a softer way of saying it than atheist, because atheist can maybe come across as more offensive to theists, to believers in God. But agnostic, then we think, well, the agnostic means I don't know if there's a God. I don't know. But actually, the classical term agnostic is a belief that you can't know there's a God, that it's not possible to know. Agnostic, that comes from is the negative of the word Gnostic. Gnosis, the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge. There was a group of people in the 1st and 2nd century who were the first people to kind of break away from the Christian movement and call themselves Gnostics. They had secret knowledge. Well, an agnostic, when you put a in front of it, means no knowledge. And agnostics, a classic agnostic, will tell you, we can't know there's a God. It's not possible to know there's a God. And I have one question for them then. How do you know that? How do you know something can't be known? I can get saying I don't know. That's a respectable, honorable, honest opinion. Why? I don't know if there's a God. That's fine. But to say I can't know, it's not possible. What authority, what dogmatic inquisitional body has decided that you can't know something? There's a ceiling over that pursuit of knowledge you can't have. I don't agree with that. To say you can't know something. It's kind of like when someone's discussing ethical issues and they say, which is a common postmodern notion, there are no absolutes. Why? There are no absolutes. Well, that's an absolute statement. How do you know there are no absolutes? I could say, I wonder if there are any absolutes. I'm not sure if there are absolutes. But if you declare there are no absolutes, you're making itself an absolute statement. It's a contradiction in terms in and of itself. And it puts a block and a limit on exploration or knowledge. I think things should be explored. Things should be interested in. We should be interested in. So yeah, I've been skeptical about religion. I've been skeptical about all kinds of things. In fact, if me and a fellow skeptic, although they probably wouldn't acknowledge me as skeptic, some of you watching it wouldn't either. If me and a classic skeptic who's an agnostic or atheist were suddenly put in in a place where there's like a psychic fair going on, we'd both have the same attitudes about psychics. We would debunk. We would probably not take it very seriously. One time I was at an event with my family, and this woman came up to me and was talking to me. She was about my age. She had kids about my same age as me, and she said, "Well, she was really into astrology." She started talking about her sign, and she said, "Oh, what sign are your kids?" And I looked at her like, "I don't know." And she looked at me like I was out of my mind. "You don't know your astrological sign of your kids?" I'm like, "No, I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe that balls of gas, light years from Earth and light years from each other that happen to appear as patterns in space to us govern my life or form my personality. So no, I honestly don't believe in." I didn't say it that harsh to her, but I don't believe in astrology. So I've never really bothered. Now, when I was a kid, I knew my sign. Everybody knew their sign. My mother read the astrology column in the newspaper all the time. And it was a popular thing. But because I am skeptical, I debunked and dismissed that a long time ago. So it's not part of my life. Now, of course, my fellow skeptic who's an atheist and agnostic would say, well, he applies the same principle to God. He or she applies the same principle to God. Well, no, I don't. I think there's more to it than that. I think it's rational to believe in God. I think my views on religion and God are very rational. They're rooted in very intellectual things. They're rooted in evidence, not empirical for absolute evidence. I cannot scientifically prove to you there's a God, but there are many indicators and things in nature that to me point that way. I think there's a lot of things in nature that we can look to, and a lot of different aspects of it. And as this goes on, we'll explore some of those things. But I want us to understand that these principles need to be explored and talked about. I want to have dialogue about that. So, and so, yes, I'm a skeptic who's come to the conclusion that I believe there is a God, and a God that has revealed himself and can be known. And as we go through these, I'll talk in greater detail about that side of it as well. But I want to invite you who are watching this to put in the comments, put in questions, ask questions, challenges. Sure, absolutely. What we can discuss, we'll discuss, and things like that. Let's look at it. Let's get an understanding of these things. Let's explore. Because I think there's a lot of areas of knowledge that people shut themselves off to because they just accept assertions or generally held conclusions about certain things. People have done this with things like, well, for example, the Bible. If you talk about anything regarding the Bible, I've a constant thing that I've heard in conversations I've had with people is, well, the Bible it's like playing the telephone game. If you whisper a word to somebody in a crowd and then pass it around, it'll be different by the time you get to the other end. It's been translated so many times. That's actually not true. The Bible, some of the things when the Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed in the 1940s, they had a lot of different kinds of literature in there. Christians think it's just Bible. There's a lot of things in there, but there wasn't, in fact, an intact copy of the book of Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah. And carbon dating demonstrated that the manuscript in there was something like 800 to 1,000 years older than the ones that were in the Bibles at the time. And when they translated that copy of the book of Isaiah, it was extremely identical to what they already had. There were variations like spelling errors and things like that, but it was essentially the same. It was not all different, even though it was centuries older. Because those individuals who did the copying and the scribes and those who copied the Bible, especially in the pre-printing press era, were so careful. So careful. They treated it with sacred, and they were very close. Now, that doesn't prove the Bible's real. That doesn't prove the Bible has any spiritual power. Maybe it is just a book of literature. There's a lot of other questions to be asked. But to dismiss it because, it's translated so differently, we don't know if it's very accurate or not, that's not a valid position. There's a lot of accuracy in the manuscripts. There are more manuscripts available for some of the Bible passages than there are for many other historical events that people just accept automatically, even though the manuscripts are hundreds of years after the events or the persons. Why is that? Well, part of it is because supernatural things take place in the Bible. If supernatural things take place in the Bible, then, that obviously that doesn't happen. There's no supernatural. There's sort of a mindset that's there. When I was in graduate school, one of my textbooks that dealt with evolutionary psychology, a good book, awesome information in it, but it was fascinating to me. At one point, they were referring to some things about the anatomy, and the textbook actually veered off a little and they said, for example, when you're talking about bodily functions, if you refer to, let's say, the liver, you mustn't never say the purpose of the liver. You can't say purpose of the liver. You can only say the function of the liver. Because if you say purpose of the liver, that might imply there's some purposer behind it, that maybe there's someone who designed or created it. We can't. It was like this animosity to even consider that factor. To the point where we play on words like purpose or function with such detail. Now many scientists, I mean, Stephen Hawking, who did, from what I understand, assert himself to be an atheist before he died, he used God metaphorically in many of his works. I've read some of his books, Brief History of Time, The Theory of Everything, Universe in a Nutshell. He would frequently, use a God reference for the mind of God or something. He used it metaphorically. Obviously, he wasn't afraid, but he wasn't afraid of the word. Sometimes there's this fear of things. I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson make an interview, who identifies himself as an agnostic. In an interview once, he says he uses the words AD and BC when he studies documents. He said a lot of people use, the popular thing now is to say BCE, before Common Era, or CE, Common Era, rather than AD, Anno Domini. We don't want a reference to Christ and the year of the Lord, whatever. He says the Jesuit guys who came up with that calendar were extremely accurate, very scientifically accurate. He says, based on that alone, he says, I take seriously using the traditional thing. I don't think you need to change that. But there does seem to be a mindset we don't want to have any references when it comes to a science issue or something. We can't have any references at all. I think that's just silly. We want to understand and be able to talk about things. The wonder of the universe does not go away because when you understand the science of it. In fact, it's more so. Again, going back to Carl Sagan, he made a statement that Tyson has said it, many people said it, how we're made out of the same thing stars are made of. We're made out of star stuff. This is wild. Well, yeah, I think that's amazing too. Our understanding of the elements, the same elements that are in stars are in I think that's amazing. But immediately, of course, as a believer, I think of my Creator. I think of the wonder of God's design. I think of that wonder when I think of creation, when I think of nature. It doesn't take away from the scientific process. See, we have this notion, Chesterton talked about this, that if you make something take longer, it somehow becomes less wondrous. For people who, like the young earth creationists, which I'm not one, just so we're clear, the people who believe that Genesis 6 days is a literal 6 days, whatever, that somehow that's miraculous if God created everything in 6 actual days. But if it took millions of years with slow infinitesimal changes and mutations and things like that somehow makes it less wonderful. It doesn't. It's still amazing. Creation is still mind-boggling. Chesterton used the illustration. He said, if in a story the fairy godmother waved her wand and turned a man into a pig, and he instantly becomes a pig, you go, wow, magic. But if she waved her wand and like 40 or 50 years over time later, the man slowly became more pig-like over time, you'd still think, wow, how did he turn into a pig? All right. So species that took long periods of time to develop and unfold, why does that presume automatically that there's no creator behind that, there's no design behind that? Why is that an automatic proposition that we turn to? It seems to me that it isn't. Science doesn't debunk God. In fact, an assertion I'll make probably regularly when I do these videos is almost all arguments against God are moral arguments. They really are. I remember the late great Christopher Hitchens when he would do debates and that with believers as a proud atheist. He would always use the example of how, well, 95 to 98% of the species on Earth that ever lived are gone now. Why would God do that? Why does if the Earth is 400 point something billion years old, how come humans have only been on the planet for 20 to 100,000 years or whatever, depending on what the latest theory is or whatever? Why would a God create this and have it go so long if man had such a value or role? What those are moral questions. They're not scientific questions. They're moral questions. They're questions of why. Why would God do this? Why would God do that? Why would God cause or allow all the dinosaurs to be wiped out 65 million years ago? Why? The fact we don't understand that doesn't dismiss God's existence. But that's essentially what happens. You make a moral argument against God. I don't understand why God would allow this, why God would allow a child to die of cancer, why God would allow an accident, why God would allow a natural disaster. So therefore, I don't believe there's a God. Well, fine. It's not an illegitimate argument. The moral argument is an argument, but it sort of pervades every argument. And I don't think that's a foundation for really exploring the question if we just simply use the moral argument and nothing else. But it's almost like the fallback position. The moral argument always comes up, and this is something that precludes us from exploring or learning or understanding, or gaining understanding in our lives. But again, if you think about it more deeply, you think more evidentially, you think more about what is or isn't available for us to learn or discover or understand. You know, I mean, for example, it's a very popular thing for a person, especially in the postmodernist culture, it's real popular, but definitely for a position of atheist, I guess, well, there are, to say something like that, they don't believe there's any objective morals. There's no objective moral. There is no objective morality that we can, as a standard. But then they turn around when someone confronts them with something like the Bible, well, they object to it morally. Well, the Bible allows slavery. Bible because this Bible does that. I've had people say you don't believe there's an objective morality, yet you're objecting to the Bible because of morality. Strange sort of way to win the argument. We want to have an understanding of these things on a practical level and be able to discuss them freely. You know, and I invite, like I said, I invite those here to with questions, comments, challenges. I'm not going to turn it into a hardcore debate, though. I want it to be a dialogue. You know, if you can learn something from me in this, great. If I can learn something from you, that's great too. It's fine. Let's have conversations. I invite you to do that in the comments. I won't say we'll do everything. We'll see. We'll look at it and see what each item says. Now, if there's snarky comments, insults, and things like that, because I know that pops up at any time you do one of these type of videos, I'm just going to ignore it. I've been through there before. It does not interest me. But if you want to have an honest conversation, yeah, let's have an honest conversation. Let's explore the existence of God, the existence of objective morality, the principles of things, spiritual truth. My objective here is not to convert you to my position per se. If you do, fine, but my main concern is to be able to have us explore, learn, grow, and talk about it. Open ourselves up. You know, have an understanding of things that goes beyond just simply standard issue things. There are things that we can talk about, all of this. You know, there are a lot of things that are quoted in textbooks, for example, in colleges, where they'll quote a statement or something like that, and that's all you know about that maybe person they're quoting is that little statement they read. Do you know what they actually wrote? Do you know what they actually read? You know, let's get into some of those things. I think that would be very interesting. Let's explore some of these questions. Because honestly, you know, as Bishop Robert Barron has pointed out, one of the greatest proofs of the existence of God is the existence of the hard sciences. So why is that? Because in order to do hard science, in order to study astrophysics or physics, astrophysics, geology, you have to believe that the universe is intelligible and the universe is filled with intelligibility. Why is the universe intelligible? Now, again, that's the scientific question. The counter to that is always the moral one. Well, you know, but why is the universe so dangerous? And how come so many people died out in the history of the world and there was nothing available for so long? And why did God, again, those are moral questions. Legitimate questions, but moral questions. But why is it we have an understanding of the elements? We understand that the same elements that are in the stars are in us. How do we understand all of the periodic tables? That human beings are composed of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and phosphorus and sulfur. Why do we know that? We know of all of these things. Why are scientific laws clear and operative? How do we believe so strongly in scientific laws but deny there's any lawmaker? How do we understand the genetic code, the DNA, the amazing structure of what we ourselves are made out of, and yet we don't acknowledge there might be a code maker? That code might have been written by someone. It didn't just spontaneously emerge. You know, it's like one person once said, I don't know who the quote's attributed to, that it's like believing that everything simply exploded into being with nothing behind it is like believing you can produce a library of books from an explosion in a print shop. You know, all the details, all the coding, there's so many factors here. And then there's our own experiences, our own spirit, you know, the subjective experiences do matter. We are human beings. I had a professor once tell me, he was saying in college, it was a great statement. He said, you know, we think about objective and subjective. He goes, understand this though. We're subjects. Subjective understanding comes from the subject, a person, looking at objects to understand objectivity. You know, so subjective shouldn't be dismissed either. All of it's part of the human experience. All is a part of who we are. Another famous quote, unfortunately, I don't know the origin of it exactly. I've heard different people quote it, was, you know, to believe that, when it comes to believing God, I refuse to believe that Hamlet can be deduced from chemicals in a petri dish. you know, the writings of Shakespeare, the music of Bach, the paintings of Da Vinci, all of the that exists within us. Is it all nothing more than code and genetics? Do we believe that all of our values, all of our morals, all of our understanding is nothing more, again, than chemical reactions in our brain? See, if our conversation is just as I heard one preacher say once, my brain fizz talking with your brain fizz, what's the point? There has to be something more behind it, more understanding, more of an ability to grasp it. Again, the counter to that, well, that you just believe you have a God to tell you what's right and wrong. We just do what's right and wrong because we don't get punished or rewarded. It's not about punishment or reward. It's about, is there something real? Is there something behind it? Is there something that matters in my life? Do values matter? Do what I value matter? Do moral principles matter? Do things like compassion and love and understanding, are they just chemical reactions in the brain? The way the species evolved in a herd instinct, or is it reality? And it really does matter. These are things I want to talk about in this. I want to have a fun dialogue, an enjoyable one. So I invite you to look into it. And yes, in future videos, we'll get into why is this the Catholic Skeptic? Why do I believe not only in God, but in the Christian God? We'll get into that. We'll talk about that as well. But I want you to be a part of it and be a part of the dialogue. And let's see where we can go with it. All right. So it's been good talking to you, and I'll see you all next time. Thank you.